On this special episode of Painting and Travel, Roger and Sarah Bansemer go to the remote desert of Gerlach, Nevada, where they participate in one of the most unusual events ever held. It's called Burning Man. We hope you'll come along.
Here we are in the middle of the desert. The nearest town is called Gerlach, Nevada. This area right here is called Black Rock City. It's where the famous Burning Man is held every year. There's going to be 65,000 people here. I think there's almost that many here right now. And one of the main attractions, of course, is the Burning Man. And at the end of the 7 days that we're here, this gets lit on fire, burns. It's quite a sight, and that's going to happen tonight. So 65,000 people will be here just for the week. After that time, everything disappears, and it's back just to desert. These are really harsh conditions out here to paint in, and often the wind blows up, and this is it's very, very fine dust. So at any time, we can actually get in what's called a whiteout, where we just can't even see more than a couple of feet ahead of us. So I've gotten out here early in the morning. I'm going to try and do a painting here quite quickly because I want to finish it before the conditions really get rough, okay? So I'm going to paint Burning Man here and these beautiful mountains in the background. I've got a limited palette here. Everything at Burning Man is limited. Everything that's brought to Burning Man has to be taken away. Even the water that I wash my brushes out here, we can't just dump that water on the playa here on the desert. All this dirty water has to be taken with us. That's one thing that impresses me about Burning Man. There's just very little trash here, and people seem to respect it. Okay, let me get started. There's so much to do here at Burning Man, so much activity, and there's so much creativity here, but this is not for everyone. You sort of have to pick and choose what you want to participate in, and if you choose them carefully, then you can have a really good time. But there's something here for everybody and every lifestyle. I'm sure there are people here that paint at Burning Man, but I've only seen one other man that has brought out his paints, and I painted with him the other day inside what they call a center circle. It's a big tent. This limited palette I have here is just ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, Indian yellow, cadmium yellow, alizarin crimson, and naphthol red. Just the three primary colors, the warm and cool of each one of those primaries. As always, I usually start from dark to light, but everything out here is light today, except some of these mountains back here. As that sun comes up, that's going to change pretty quickly. These are acrylic paints, by the way. And then we're starting to get a breeze, so these paints will dry fairly rapidly on me. I have a little atomizer here, and I always bring this with me. This helps me to keep my paints wet, keep the board wet a little bit, and also keep me a little bit cool too if it gets too hot out here. And boy, does it get hot out here, I'll tell you. I'm just going to block in these colors very quickly. And I've always said that my goal is not to paint quickly out here, but conditions, especially here, really warrant it, because this can turn ugly at any moment. And the sun just goes up, so all the colors change. So painting quickly outdoors becomes really a necessity. My center of interest here is going to be the Burning Man, but this is going to dry fairly quickly, I think. And then once I get this big shapes blocked in, then I'll put the Burning Man in here. A little Indian yellow, alizarin crimson, and we'll just maybe a touch of cerulean blue and a little bit of white. We'll make this opaque. This board was covered with burnt sienna to begin with, which gives me a nice warm tone. Nice warm tone to start with. That way I don't have to deal with all that white surface. It's almost like half the painting's already done for me, having this warm tone on here. As the sun is still low on the horizon, all this color tends to be very warm. As the sun goes up, all these colors will get cooler. One of the fun aspects of being at Burning Man is seeing all the vehicles that are driving around, and they're all considered public transportation. So if you bring an art car to Burning Man, part of the deal is that you have to drive people around as sort of it's the bus transportation, but most everyone here has a bicycle. There's just tens of thousands of bikes here. Nighttime is when a lot of the activity takes place. There's a lot of sculptures and events that entail big fire, big flames, propane.
Burning Man, there are a number of groups who have interesting ideas, and they culminate in wonderful things like this sculpture behind me. Now, there's a group called the Flaming Lotus Girls, which is mostly women, but not entirely women. And they have composed this lovely sculpture called Soma. And I'd love to know what inspired that.
So Soma was inspired. I'm a chemist. Mills here is a histopathologist. There's a lot of scientists in our group, and we were really interested in the brain. Brain's sort of the final frontier, and so we wanted to celebrate that aspect of humanity. And so we built this sculpture, which is it's two neurons talking to one another.
Well, someone went by on a bicycle earlier, and they said, "Oh, those girls had a lot of nerve." So,
that's a good one.
I like that. I didn't know what she was talking about then, but I do now. And so you've got a combination of flames and LED lights. And so at nighttime, this is spectacular. And now you're the propaniac.
Mills is actually a propaniac.
I'm propaniac junior.
So most of the sculpture runs on gas propane. And it has continuous flame coming out of a lot of the dendrites, sort of initiating signals, sort of showing signals coming into the neurons. And also all the way down the spine, there are continuous flames and also what we call poofers, which are basically small flame effects that build up gas, and you release a solenoid valve by pushing a button.
Now, did you start out with just a small model and figure out from there how to build this?
You should talk about the model, Charlie.
Well, I mean, yes, we did. We built a model. We had an 1.5-inch scale model of the whole sculpture, and the entire thing was built out of that with a tape measure and little pieces of wire, literally modeled everything. This looks very similar to the model, and it was a way for a lot of people to be able to fabricate simultaneously. The fabrication was done in only just about 3 months, with another 3 months of planning. It's done by about 70 volunteers, and with a tremendous amount of work.
And the most amazing part about that, I think, is that most of the people this year were new. This is a group that really encourages people to come in who've never built art before, have never played with metal before, never played with fire. A lot of our people have never even been to Burning Man before, and they just came in, and we're a teaching group, and we so we taught everybody how to weld, how to plumb, how to really think about sculpture and
And learn a trade.
And learn a trade, yeah.
And learn a trade, and especially, you know, I mean, it's really wonderful to see like people, and it's often women who've never really even used a screwdriver power tool in their life. You know, by the the end of the summer, they're like welding and chopping and grinding.
I feel much smarter just having heard you explain it. Thank you so much. And goodbye to the Flaming Lotus girls.
Bye.
Bye.
Mixing some ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson. These mountains over there are very, very purple. This acrylic it's not drying as fast as I thought I would. It's getting really tacky now, so I'm able to go over this with a second coat. Usually I try and do a fairly presentable painting while I'm out here, but today this is really, I think, what's going to be considered a sketch. It's just get some things down here, just enjoy the weather while it's still good. It's all pretty enjoyable. Even this booming techno sounds that are coming from every direction it's just about the most surreal situation that I've ever been in. If you remember that movie Blade Runner, that's what I feel like. I'm in the movie Blade Runner right now, especially at night. Well, I've done something here that I probably shouldn't have done, and I very seldom do it. It's a natural thing to do when you're painting. You have to be aware of it all the time, and it's not to divide your painting in half. And that's exactly what I've done. I could go back and change this. It's not too late to do that. I just wasn't thinking. That's one of the problems being outside, is that you just sort of get overwhelmed by the whole situation. But one thing I could do, if I choose to, when I get back, is I could actually crop this board. I could just take the board and cut it off and make this a longer and narrower board. So I might do that. So instead of changing it right now, because I'm afraid this dust might come up, I'm just going to continue with this. But generally speaking, I should not have divided that right in half, and I did. It's just one of those things that happens all the time. As much as I've painted outside and inside, of course, I'm just not immune to the same issues and problems of composition that everybody deals with. You'd think I would learn by now that you'd think it would be a natural thing just not to divide my board in half, but the natural thing is to divide your board in half. That's what I did, because I'm standing here talking and not thinking too much. Wow, just look at those shadows on that mountain, or where the sunlight's hitting. It's just beautiful. This is a real test, being out here at Burning Man and painting. Painting on location it's always been difficult, but it's much more rewarding than painting in the studio, because I can really see a lot more colors out here than I ever could from a photograph. And I take that knowledge, even if I don't come up with a good painting here, I take that knowledge of the colors that I see out here, and I can bring that into the studio and apply it to the next painting I do. This is still a little bit tacky, but not too much. It's getting fairly dry. One thing I'm observing out here that sort of baffles me a little bit is that in all landscapes, with the exception of what I'm looking at now, the foreground is always more intense in color, there's always more contrast, and it's always brighter. When painting a landscape, as things recede in the background, like these mountains back here, there's more atmosphere between me and the distant mountains, so things get a little bit grayer, the color drops off, and the color is always more intense right up here in the foreground. But as I look at this playa, this desert area, all this color in here looks to be the same value, the same intensity, and the same color. I'm not sure why that is, but it just kind of proves to me that rules that I live by as a landscape painter just totally get to change when I get in certain conditions like this. But having said that, I think I'm going to make this a little more, leave this a little more intense and gray this down just a little bit, just so my painting will have a little more atmosphere. See, by making this a little bit lighter, just gives me a feeling of a little bit more distance here, with this being a little more intense and this a little bit less intense. Now I'm going to jump in and paint the Burning Man. That's why we're here. For anyone that loves to do portraits, this is a fantastic area in which to find a lot of great characters, great faces. I think I'm going to start with sort of the shadow side of these unusual shapes over here. When you take a closer look at Burning Man over here, it's really an amazing architectural structure because it's just made with short pieces of 2x4 all nailed together. And whoever did that, I think, was quite a genius to have sculpted that out of just short pieces of lumber and had it all hold together like that, because the winds out here get really strong. And of course, all this has to be built so it's safe until tonight when it all goes up in flames. It's going to be quite a riot out here tonight with all the people and all the activity. But tomorrow night, there's another very beautiful structure right back here called the temple. And that will also be burned tomorrow night. But the difference between tonight and tomorrow night, from what I understand, is that tomorrow night when the temple is burned, everybody's totally quiet. So tonight, I think, is the big party night. And tomorrow night, I think it's a whole different atmosphere, maybe a little bit more respect for the temple. And what I heard is that basically all you can hear is the flames. I'm just putting in these darker shapes now with some warm colors. I'm going to have these little peaks extend up above the horizon a little bit. I don't want them to become right on this horizon line, so I want them to feel like they're rising up above these mountains. Being a painter is all about being selective too, and there's a lot of cranes and just some vehicles, because I think they're doing a little bit of work on the Burning Man right now, so I'm going to leave all those out. I'll also take a photograph before I leave, and so I'll be able to put in some more detail back at the studio. Now that I have in these basic shapes, I'm going to put in some highlights here on this architectural structure. So I'll mix up some cadmium yellow light, some naphthol red, and a little bit of white. I think if I had more time, I would have more accurately drawn the architecture of this, because it's just quite stunning. It's basically round. I mean, it's not really round, but it's circular. So most of my highlights will be on this side. Pick up a little more white, a little more yellow, and just make some of the highlights a little more intense on a few of these. We got some really nice darks back in here. But if I make these too dark back in here, it'll almost make it look like it's part of the mountain if it's the same value. But this being wood, it is quite warm, so I'm going to put a little bit of naphthol red. I'm going to really warm this up for these dark areas, so they'll be dark, but they'll be very warm. Maybe on the far side here, I'm just going to take some pure cerulean blue. That way I'll have some really intense colors here, and it will give some more focus to the center of interest. Another thing I have to remember when I paint outside in the direct sunlight, when I bring the painting inside, these colors will look a lot brighter than they do outside. Starting to be quite a few people walking around now. But I'll just indicate a few, just little spots back here and there of people and bicycles. It always surprises me how many colors I can mix with just the 3 primary colors, and often I put more colors on my palette. My palette changes all the time. I'm not one to just have one palette and just remain with it. I always put out whatever colors I feel like putting out. For myself personally, I don't have any rules and regulations about what colors to have on my palette. I do know that the more colors I have on my palette, sometimes the more confusing things get as far as trying to create harmony within my painting. So I think when I get back in the studio, it might be fun to take look at some of my reference photos with all the dust that's been blowing around, and maybe add a little bit of a dust storm in here. So I think I might do that. Now there's no strong highlights coming across this sand because we got the sun here, and this is a perfectly flat desert area called the playa. But just to make things a little more interesting in my painting, I'm just going to put a little bit of sunlight across here. Now this could happen because there could be clouds in the sky. This could be a little bit in shadow, and there could be patches of sunlight coming across here. Maybe a touch or two of highlights across here, which I don't really see. Why would I put something in there that I don't see? You know, it's just painting on location. You just sort of get a feeling or a hint of a color, and as an artist or as a painter, you can make things a lot more interesting by just going with certain feelings about what might look good in a picture. I might put a hint of foreign note of color in here. Here, I'll just indicate a few of the tents and camps right back here. Since the Burning Man is made up of all these short pieces of 2x4s, it would be nice if I could indicate them in some way, but from this distance, it's they don't really show up that much as texture. It looks very lacy from here. With just a little bit of dry brush on here, it's helping me to indicate the look of those 2x4s. There are a number of other large sculptures around the playa here, and we visited several of them, and every one of them has a very unique story. I think I'll take this dark color and right here run this shadow out underneath it a little more precisely. I can start to see some dust kicking up way over there. I think I'd like to put some of that in. It's a big part of Burning Man. Boy, I know at any minute here we're gonna get a dust storm. We've been here a week and I can feel it. So I'm going to wrap this up pretty quickly, I think. Sometimes little dust devils just occur from nowhere, and all of a sudden you'll just see this big swirling dust. Well, that's all I'm going to do on this painting here. I'll take it back to the studio and work on it some more. This will be one of my souvenirs from the Burning Man. It's going to get warm here in a while. I know it's going to get dusty. So we'll spend the rest of the day just touring around and seeing all the activities and a lot of the creative vehicles and sculptures that are in this tremendous event. We'll finish this up, put a frame on it a little bit later, and we'll see what it looks like.
For more information about painting and travel with Roger and Sarah Bansemer, visit paintingandtravel.com.